sit there and look at the camera. Big eyes, blinking. What music is that? Wow.
I know, just the person.
Absolutely. Hello, and welcome to Journeys with Judy. I am Judy, your host for the hour. We have Jen Bucko behind the camera. She's our creative producer and does all things techie.
Yes.
We are here in Hershey, Pennsylvania with Stephanie Dodd tonight.
Hi.
In her beautiful home.
Thank you.
It is so warm and cozy here.
Thank you so much.
Yes. You have 3 beautiful children.
Yes.
And the house is just so welcoming.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's
thank you.
Kick off your shoes, put your feet on the couch. I love it.
That's what we aim for here.
I love it. I love it. So, Stephanie, we met you in 2017, right?
Yeah.
In Mongo.
Yes.
Yes. It was quite an adventure.
It was quite an adventure for all of us in so many ways. Really magical.
Yes, and in just the 2 years since then, so many things have shifted and changed for you.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to hear about, because, there we didn't have the opportunity to really hear about your journey.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm super excited to be able to find things out about you that I don't know.
Yeah, well, that is what you do on this show, so I'm totally open and we will do it.
All right, so we'll start with, where were you born and raised?
All right. I was born in York, Pennsylvania. I left shortly after college and said I'd never move back. Never! Right? And I've come to learn that whenever I say never, it often means I'm going to at some point.
It's a declaration that it will happen.
Yes, yes. So when I hear that phrase coming out, I'm like, oh, this is what's to come. But I didn't know that back then. And I was very nomadic, moving up and down the East Coast for many years.
Mm.
When I met my husband, we were living in Atlanta. Life unfolded in such a way that we were like, well, if we're going to get married and make babies, maybe we should be closer to family, because it's really expensive to just fly you home with me now. And if we have kids, that's going to be really expensive. So we moved, but we moved to Philly.
Okay.
And what's interesting is I had asked my job for a transfer, and the position they wanted me to move into was right here in Hershey, and I said, absolutely not.
Okay.
No way. I will never move back to that area. No, if I am moving to Pennsylvania, it is to a city, and Philadelphia is the only place I will move to. So
Okay.
it's really kind of funny that we have
Full
circled
circle.
back, and here we are in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Do you have any siblings?
I do. I'm the youngest of 3.
Ooh.
Yeah, so my brother is 5 years older than I am, and my sister is 2.5 years older than I am. And they are both in this area as well.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's awesome that your kids get to grow up with their aunts and uncles so close,
Yes.
because they're so important.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's a whole different relationship, and I also get to show up as an aunt in a whole different way
It's so
than
fun being
I
an
got
aunt.
to. Yeah. Well, I can actually get to know them instead of feeling like I'm catching up on their lives.
Right.
Whenever.
You get to be a part of it now,
Yeah.
which is a huge difference.
It's really cool.
It is. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Being in Hershey ain't so bad.
It's not so bad. It's actually really great.
How would you best describe your childhood?
I think my childhood was very typical for your standard white middle class family with, I had 2 parents in the household who worked very, very hard. I think that we started off with a lot less when I was younger. My dad worked 365 days some years on holidays just to pay the bills, right, and provide for us. And they really kept that mentality all of our lives. My dad, I remember, like, one of us had a car, and yet his car still, you could literally see through to the ground because it was so rusted out. But they really, I think, worked really hard to give us, what they wanted, what they envisioned for their family. So I think in that way, that's so standard and it's so typical, and yet I think I was young. I was like 5 when I also knew that I was different, right?
Okay.
So I had this like, from the outside, everything looked very normal, but I think from a young age, I was like, I'm not like everybody else, right? So internally, I think I felt, I don't know if it's hard to put my knowledge now on what those childhood emotions were then,
Right.
because I didn't know what I was feeling, but I think I knew at a very young age. I remember being like, who am I? And listening for the answers and being like, people don't talk about this.
Oh, wow. So you listened for the answers. Did you hear them?
I think I did to
Yeah.
a certain point,
Okay.
and then I think I realized nobody else talks about this. So how can I turn that off?
Right.
Right? And I think my parents worked so hard to provide for us that they also didn't have necessarily the time to provide for themselves, right? I think I was raised with 2 really intuitive parents who don't even, maybe to this day, still know the full extent of their gifts because, and that's typical. I see myself doing it. Let me provide for my kids and kids and kids, and oh wait, hold on, I've got to come back to me first.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I had anybody to go to and be like, so what is this voice I'm hearing?
Right.
Like, nobody talked about that.
No.
It was just kind of like,
No.
yeah.
Okay. So Jen, we laugh because Jen lives in Redline, and I'm from Baltimore. I'm a transplant. So we drive around York doing these interviews to different places, and we're like, York is so big.
Yes,
big.
it's huge.
So what part did you grow up in?
So I graduated from Redline High School.
Okay.
My mom taught in Dallastown. We kind of lived on, like, very close to the corner of, so you've got Dallastown here, Redline here, York Suburban here, I think West
York?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or Eastern York, whatever that,
I've
that
learned a lot of
pocket
that because my daughter plays basketball.
So you
and
travel.
all those, That's why I was like, York is huge.
Is huge. So we had a York address, but York itself, York proper in the city. I was much older till I started frequenting, like, in town, being like, oh, this is, but that's not actually true, because we'd go to York Market and different things.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. So you graduated from Redline.
I did.
Yeah.
I graduated from, Redline in itself is huge.
Yeah.
So I had friends in district who lived 45 minutes away from me.
Oh, wow.
That's how big Redline is itself as a school district.
Wow. That's such a cute little town.
It is cute.
Yeah.
I'd never move there. Just kidding.
Jen was driving through going, it's darling. She came from Philly.
Yeah, and I feel like moving to Redline, people are like, you moved to Redline?
Exactly.
Yes.
From
Did you know where you were
Right.
going?
That never happened.
Exactly.
What would you say is one of your fondest childhood memories?
All right. So I think most of my memories, I was just thinking about this earlier today because I've seen you ask this question. And so the answer that came to me was, there's only one time that I actually remember it being a thing, like a tangible thing. And that is when we got Nintendo for Christmas. And we were so excited. And my mom stayed up all night long playing it.
Oh,
and
no.
wouldn't let us play. Like, we got to wake up and open it up at like midnight. I think they were so excited. And then it was like, go back to bed. Go to bed. And she's like, Tetris.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But getting that Nintendo, but I think most of my fondest childhood memories were experiences. Like, we traveled a lot. We all piled in the car and we drove places. And so when I think about, that's actually what came up for me. We used to save our change. So if we got change or if my parents got change, we had a piggy bank at a specific place, and everyone knew to put, and when that change jar was full, we had enough money to go to the Embassy Suites.
Oh.
And that was our vacation. And we knew nothing else. They had free booze, right? You got happy hour.
Happy hour.
You've got food. You've got booze. You've got your pool. You've got your hot tub.
Parents happy, kids happy.
Glass elevators. So
Ooh.
we would go, and my parents could sit in the happy hour atrium with their free drinks, right? And they're not like huge drinkers,
Right.
but you know what it costs to go out when that is your vacation. And they could watch us because we'd play hide and go seek, and we'd always meet other kids, and we'd play, and you could take the glass elevators, but they could still keep an eye on us.
Right.
I can't fathom letting my kids run around a hotel these days. Like, I'm scared them just walking out of my sight in a hotel. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But that's what we did, and we all took care of each other, and we didn't know any.
It's what it was.
It wasn't like, oh, people are jaunting off to go skiing in
Right.
Utah or whatever. It was just like, hey, enough money, let's go, and we were
That's
so
so
excited,
cool.
and it was, and those things like stick out in my mind.
Yeah.
And so as I was thinking about it, as we're coming up on the holiday season, I was reminded of that. Like, my kids aren't going to remember the toys that we buy. It's going to be the things that we do.
It's funny that you said that because as soon as you said you pile in the car, we had a VW bus. And my parents would just wake up and they'd be like, all right, pile in, we're going to go to the beach for the day. And we would drive to the beach for the day.
That's amazing.
It was awesome. With snowing, we went, one of the blizzards, we drove down to the beach because we wanted to see the big chunks of ice washing up on the shore. It was awesome. My little sister fell in. She had so many layers on her, the water never even got to her skin. But that was a funny story on its own.
How much younger than you is she?
She is 4 years younger than me.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad always joked and said my mom was only fertile every 4 years in the spring. Because we're all January, February, December babies. And we're all about 4 years apart.
And you're the middle?
I'm the middle girl.
Okay.
I have an older brother and then he has 3 sisters. Poor
Okay.
guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So what would you say was challenging for you as a child? And you had mentioned before that
Yeah.
at a very young age you knew you were different.
I knew it. Like, I have that memory of just like looking up and being like, who am I? But no, I'm not asking like, who am I here? I'm asking like, who am I?
Right.
Right? And so I think I can use my language now and say that there was always a loneliness
Okay.
factor that was there,
Mhm.
that I didn't have the language to express that
Right.
then. Like, I can say that now,
Mhm.
but it was just kind of like, so I'm also a Pisces, so I'm also very chameleon-like. So it's like, who do you want me to be right now? Okay.
Okay.
I'll be that person. And I think that that plays really well in being the youngest and the third child, in that, like, all right, well, what role do you need me to fill? I'll fill that role, right? And so I think that I also grew up very much people-pleasing, and, oh, well, you like it when I do this? Okay, I'll do more of that. Right. And so I think that there was this part of me who was like seeking to know my truth, but externally I was just like, I will just disconnect and be whatever you need me to be, I will be that for you. And so, yeah, it was like I fit in, but I didn't actually fit in all the time, right? So it's also,
You did what you had to do to fit into different.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So lots of been bridesmaids in lots of weddings, but when it came time for my own wedding, I was like, but who are my people? Wow. Right? So because those friendships would be really solid and great for a period of time, but then it was like, oh, just, whatever happens, then happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about school.
Yeah.
How'd you do in school?
Good.
Yeah?
So, perfectionist, people pleaser. I remember I got 1 C in elementary school. I can kind of remember what precipitated it. It was in 3rd grade. It was Mrs. McMurdy. It was science class. I still feel shame over that, right?
We need to work on that.
And so I always did good, and again, there was a role that I could fill because my sister, while extremely intelligent and lovely and fun person, she wasn't book smart, or she didn't apply herself in that way.
Gotcha.
So she was a senior in high school and I was a freshman, and she needed to pass her final paper in order to graduate. It wasn't just like, you need to hand it in. It was like,
no, you
need to pass.
Wow.
And she came to me and was like, what do I do? And I was like, oh, I'll stay up and write your paper for you. And so as a 9th grader, I pulled an all-nighter and I wrote her paper for her. and she passed.
Wow.
I mean, of course she passed because, right, I held
Right.
myself to pretty high standards.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So did people know that prior to this? Surprise!
I don't think I knew that until, breaking that down over the past, probably 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So her diploma should have your name on it.
Very well could. When I became a senior and I had to write that paper, I was like, I think I should just be able to hand hers in again. I've already done this.
Fix the name. It's all good.
Yep. He won't remember, will he?
That's funny. Okay, so as far as when you're the chameleon, you can fit in anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So you find out, at what point did you figure out that you had a lot of acquaintances but
Mm-hmm.
very few close friends? Or is that something you were always aware of?
I think in a sense I was somewhat aware of it, but
Mhm.
not in the way that I am today.
Yeah.
Right? So now I can evaluate a friendship and be like, is this friendship filling my need to fill that loneliness hole, or is this a friendship that I want to invest in, right? And so I've also learned kind of what it takes to invest in a relationship, and that also happens when you move so much.
Right.
And I've had the opportunity to make friends over and over and over and
Okay.
over again,
Right.
that it kind of gives you that bird's eye view.
Mhm.
But I would say my wedding was really an eye-opener for me,
Okay.
of like, what's going on here, right?
Wow.
And so, and then you become a mom and your identity just blows up, and it's like, God. We moved to a brand new city and made a baby 5 months later, and it was like, yeah. So I think it's been something I've also never felt that where I had moved was going to be my final place
Okay.
until here.
All right.
So
So you were openly nomading around.
I was very openly nomading around.
Okay, so you graduate high school, you went off to college. Where did you go?
I went to Penn State.
Okay.
And I went to Penn State. I had grown up saying, I'll never go to Penn State. Everybody from here goes to Penn State. I'll never, right? And so
off to Penn State you go.
Off to Penn State I go. So my sister, again, so she was a senior when I was a freshman in high school. So she went to Penn State Mount Alto, which is one of their satellite campuses, and had the best time. And then you can transfer as a junior. So when it was time for me to apply to schools as a junior and she was transferring to Penn State, I was like, well, that's the only place I'm going.
Oh.
And I said it, and I'm only going to go because back then, in order to get accepted as a freshman to main campus, most people had to get accepted to go to the summer. And I was like, and I'm not going to have to go for the summer, right? And that's how it happened. But then I was like, I actually want to go for the summer. Like, I'm done. Get me out of here.
Can I volunteer to go for the summer?
But it's so funny because I think about this often, and I think about how, like, well, I wanted to go to Michigan, but somebody told me it's too cold there. I really wanted to go to RIT, but somebody told me it was too expensive. I really wanted to go to USC in California, but somebody told me it was too far. And so I think that's also been a theme of, like, I want to do this, but somebody tells me not to.
And you're like,
and I'm like,
okay. Oh, wow.
yeah. So Penn State was easy. It was like the easy choice. And it was exactly, it's on my path.
And what did you major in?
5 different majors.
All right. We know your majors as well.
Yes, absolutely. I ended up in marketing.
Okay.
So.
What were the other 4 you tested?
All right. So I started out in psychology. Funny thing is, I now have a master's degree in psychology. But somebody told me, well, you'll never make money with a psychology degree unless you have your doctorate, and that's way too much schooling. So from there, I went to childhood education. From there, I also did nutrition. From there, I did finance, and from finance, I ended up in marketing.
Okay.
I think my sister said, you just need to pick a major, and marketing's an easy one at this point. Here you go.
You're like, okay.
Okay.
All right. So
And at that point,
challenging in college was sticking to a major.
It was way too late in the game to keep changing my major, so I think that's why I just stayed there.
Okay. All right. So you graduate, and what happens? Where'd you go?
Oh, wow. So I graduate. Right when I was engaged to somebody, I was engaged to my college sweetheart.
Mm-hmm.
And we were to be married, graduate in May, get married in July.
Oh.
And I called off the wedding 30 days before the wedding.
30 days?
30 days. 31 actually, because I
Okay.
remember my dad saying, I'm glad you did what you needed to do, but at 31 days I can still get some money back. At 30 days,
Forget it.
you gotta pay in full.
Wow. Okay.
And so from there, I think I had interviewed for jobs. I think about this too. I had interviewed for a sales job specifically in Pittsburgh that I think could have, it was a crossroad in my life. But I remember during that interview being like, but what about him? What about him having a job? What about him, right?
So what made you call it off?
If you ask that, I think I was listening to my intuition.
Wow.
Yeah. Before we got engaged, I remember saying, I had no idea he was going to propose. I remember saying to a friend, if he proposes to me, I will say no.
Ooh.
And then in that moment,
Right.
you say yes.
Mm-hmm.
I found out later, don't think the story ends there. I got back together with him.
Okay.
After I called off the engagement, like a year later, at which point I found out that he had been cheating on me with one person, and there was like a love connection, right? So that calling it off, I didn't know at the time that it was intuition, but I can look back on it now and be like, that was intuition. And that was probably one of the times that I felt safe going to my parents and saying, I need help. Because I had called them a few weeks prior and they came up to visit and I said, I don't think I want to get married. And it was a time when they were able to just like really show up in love without judgment and just be like, I remember them saying to me, we have not always been in love in our marriage, but we always had an underlying thread of love that we knew could get us through.
Okay.
If you don't think you have that thread, marriage is really hard, then maybe you shouldn't get married. And if you do, if this is just a time where you're out of love, but you still have that thread, that's what you have to decide. Like they kind of took that, like, this isn't about the wedding or not the wedding.
Right.
This is like,
this is about life.
and that was one of the times that I can pinpoint of being like, oh wow, they really showed up for me there.
Wow.
In that moment.
And what great advice.
Yeah. I still hold on to that advice.
That's
right?
great advice.
Yeah. And so I knew that visceral feeling, even though I didn't know what that visceral feeling was in the way that I do now.
Right. So when he asked why, what did you say?
Oh, I don't even know.
You don't even remember?
His first question wasn't why. His first question was, can I have the ring back?
Wow. And then you got back
That's
together
the way
with him?
I remember it.
Then you
whether
got back
that
together
was,
with
I know,
Stephanie?
exactly. I was desperate. I was not desperate. I was desperate to be loved.
Right.
You know.
So that's what you do. You do things like that.
Things like that. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I feel you, girl.
Yep. Not the first boy I moved for either.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you call off the wedding. You're interviewing for jobs.
So I get a job in Harrisburg, doing financial planning. Now, my mom had the good graces of when my brother turned 21, they carded her. And so she just had, so here I am, 21, 22 years old, fresh out of college. I look like I'm 15. I did okay because I'm also very like, who do you want me to be? And I'll show up and I'll be that person, right? I can connect and I can get people to open up to me, right? So that's a superpower, I guess, if you want to call it that. So I could build trust with people quickly, even though I had no clue. And my boss was like, you don't need to know what you're doing with their money. You come back and I'll tell you what to do with their money, right?
Okay.
You just need to go out and sell this.
Right.
And so I could do that, but there was one guy, and he looked at me and he said, I think you are so sweet. I want to turn over my money to you, but you look like a child, and I can't. And I was like,
He was honest.
You're speaking the truth.
Exactly.
I do. And I feel like a child,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so it wasn't too long afterwards where I was like, I don't think this is my long-term job.
Okay. So we moved on, and where did we go?
So then I followed that fiance to Pottsville, Pennsylvania, coal mining region.
Oh.
Uh-huh.
And what did we do there?
So there, I got a job at an insurance agency. I called them up. I said, I want to move to the area. Here's my resume. They said, come in for an interview, and I had a job that same day.
Wow.
It was just like that.
Nice and easy. Okay.
Just like that. A few months later, I said, you know what? You guys need a director of marketing, and I want to be that. And they were like,
okay.
here you go. And I was like, and I want a raise.
Okay.
So I got all of that. And then what happened is somebody rear-ended me. And I had no idea that there was this thing where insurance companies would call you and offer you money.
Uh-huh.
Like, I didn't know that that was a thing
Uh-huh.
when you're in a car accident. And it wasn't a serious car accident, but because I had full tort, which is something my dad taught me to always have, which is funny because we didn't have it at a point where it would have come really in handy. But anyway, this insurance company called me up and said, so our person rear-ended you. How does $4,000 sound to you? And I was like, what do you mean? So that you don't sue him. Okay. So I took that $4,000 and I got the hell out of Pottsville.
I'm out of here.
I'm rich. And that was the first time I had money in savings. And so I went and I lived with my friend in Boston.
Oh no.
So I went to Boston, lived off that $4,000, met another boy and followed him to South Carolina.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the meantime, I had applied to be an airline attendant. And this is important because that's like kind of the only regret I have. I had a job lined up as an airline attendant, but I was supposed to start at the time that this boy that I met was moving to South Carolina. And they called and said, we need to postpone your start date 3 months. And that's when I was like, all right, I'll just go down to South Carolina for 3 months and then I'll take the job.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do it because I walked into a job fair and I walked out with a job.
And what did you do down there?
So down there, I worked for ECPI. It's a community college, and I was helping the students get internships. So I was responsible for working both with the students, helping them prepare their resume, talking to them about how to show up professionally. But then I also was out locally calling on businesses saying, like, will you please take our students for an internship? They're free. I promise they will show up. You can give them whatever. But it was great because it was a technical college. And so we're going back, you know, that would have been, I don't know, I was 23, 24 at the time. 15.
It was a little bit ago.
Yeah, it was
Just a little bit.
18, whatever that math is. It was a long time ago. And so technology.
Jen, the math.
Yeah.
Just see what you're doing over there.
Carry the one.
You also need to be the time clock because we'll just chat all night long.
I know.
Yeah, so that's what I did.
All right, so we're in South Carolina. It didn't work out with that young gentleman.
No, again, that was intuition, but oh God, I got back together with him too, this time in Atlanta.
And it was
So I leave South Carolina and I'm like, I'm gonna follow my dream. I'm moving to New York City. I get an apartment off of Craigslist. My parents, God bless them, I think they tried to be like, what are you doing? And I was like, you don't know anything, Mom and Dad.
oh no.
So I get an apartment off of Craigslist, also because this psychic on the street told me that this boy in South Carolina, he was all black energy and I was all white energy, and we didn't.
Okay, I'm out of here.
So at that time, everything I owned fit in my car. So I pack up my car, go to New York City, end up paying, okay, so I'm basically in, oh gosh, I'm so embarrassed to say I can't think, 125th and 5th Avenue, Harlem. So I'm basically on like the Harlem border of New York. So this apartment, I'm paying $800 a month. I have no idea what that means in New York City money. I'm just like, well, New York City is an expensive place. I guess that's what you pay.
Right.
I come later to find out that my roommates broke up with her boyfriend, started doing cocaine, and stopped paying rent. So when we got the eviction notice,
Oh
I realized rent was only $1,100 a month. So I was covering most. So I was like, I'm out of here. This isn't working out for me.
Oh no. Okay. Oh, all right.
So I did what a girl does, and I moved to Atlanta because Atlanta's a big city that's less expensive than New York, so it seems reasonable.
Okay.
Also, boy from South Carolina and I had talked about Atlanta, so I moved to Atlanta. Turns out he moves to Atlanta, and right back to, will somebody just please love me?
Right.
And there we go again.
Mm-hmm.
And there we go again. And I will say, there, you know, I think that there are people on your path that are soul connections,
Oh, yeah.
and I think had I stayed with that person,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are soul lessons that could have been learned through that, but there was also, I was a heavy drinker at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He was a heavy drinker. That was a deep connection for us, but I also think that it was, yeah, you know, it wasn't the path for this lifetime.
Right.
So I meet Patrick in
I was gonna
Atlanta.
say, when does Mr. Wonderful come in?
So that's the end of all of that.
So all of that happened so that you could meet.
My very nomadic husband, who also up and down and out to the West Coast and down to Florida and back all around. So we were both very nomadic.
And oddly enough, you both end up in Atlantic City.
Atlanta.
Atlanta.
In Atlanta,
Sorry,
yeah.
Atlanta.
So story here is pretty good. Randomly see a deal to go on a American Airlines flight to Belize. So I asked friends, anyone want to go to Belize? So a friend says yes, so we're off to Belize. While we're in Belize, I meet this young girl who's traveling around the world. They have these things called, it's basically an around the world ticket. So
Okay.
you get to land in like different spots, and that's what your ticket is.
Huh.
So at this point, I'm making really good money. I'm a strong, independent, 28-year-old woman, and I was like, I'm gonna sell everything I own, and I'm gonna go travel around the world. Like, all I do is work to buy things, and it's not fulfilling.
Right.
Like, I knew at that point it wasn't
At 28,
fulfilling.
you knew that.
And so I make this decision while I'm in Belize. I come home and my house that I had just bought was broken into, robbed, and most of my belongings were gone.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, well,
Wow.
so I'm not going to
Okay.
sell this stuff, but I don't have this stuff, so I'm going to go online dating because a girl's got to eat, right? Well, actually, what happened first is for 2 weeks, I was like, I'm going to save all of my money because I don't have things to sell,
Right.
and I'm going to go travel the world. And then after 2 weeks, I was like, this really sucks, and a girl's got to eat. So set up my profile. Within 3 days, meet Mr. Right.
Ooh.
We just talk incessantly over email for 3 days, and I was like, sorry, I might not be moving or traveling around the world. So we have our first date. It was the day before Easter. I had asked a guy that I had gone out on a couple of dates with, like, before, if he wanted to do sunrise service with me, and he was like, ew, no. And I asked Patrick, do you want to do sunrise service with me? I'll come pick you up. And again, I was a little bit older at this point. I was like, I'm really going to a boy's house to pick him up at like 3:30 in the morning. Like, is this okay? But we had talked.
Sure it is.
We had the best first date. After the date, we went home. We talked on the phone for hours more, like until it was like, I gotta go to bed so I can come pick you up in 2 hours. And we went to sunrise service, and that was it. Like, game over.
Oh, that's awesome.
We were engaged 6 months later, married 6 months later, pregnant 6 months after that. So it was all
Wow.
like boom, boom, boom.
Okay.
And here we are in Hershey,
And
Pennsylvania.
here you are. And how long have you been married?
We have been married coming up on 10 years. So March will be 10 years.
And 3 beautiful babies.
Yes, yes, indeed. 3 and done.
She will never have another baby. Stay
Don't
tuned.
say that. There's potential when we foster. I will say that.
Okay.
Yeah. No more babies coming out of this body.
Okay. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So, in all of that, I mean, moving freely, it just amazes me. First of all, that you just have no qualms of picking up and going somewhere new.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think at one point it was when I sat my parents down at their kitchen table and I was like, so New York didn't work out, I'm gonna move to Atlanta. And they were like, my mom said to me, what do you think you're running away from?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you don't know anything. I'm not running away from anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I circle back to that sometimes, and I'm like, she was right. She was totally right.
Mm-hmm. But it all had to happen.
But it all had to happen. Somebody had said to me once, and this wasn't intuitive, but this line stuck with me. And not but, because there's no but to this. This line stuck with me. You might not be rich, but you'll never be poor. Everything you need always shows up for you. And that's been true. Everywhere I moved, I always went, asked for a job, got a job.
Got the job.
Wow. Until it's so funny, like, until I stopped working and having kids, and now my struggle has been, but I want to be doing something, but what is that thing that brings me full fulfillment?
Right. You're not just looking for employment to get money. You're
Right.
looking for your
yeah.
life's purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that, you ask about, like, what did I struggle with as a child?
Yeah.
That's what I struggle with as an adult. And I think I actually know I'm actually on the path and getting closer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, at 5, you knew you were different.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people that we interview say very similar things, and then they talk about how they shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have an awareness in shutting it down, or you knew you just shouldn't speak of it? Because you've had intuitive hits, and like you said, you didn't know at that time, but do you think it's something?
I consciously know I was shutting it down? No.
Okay.
Not a clue.
Okay.
Not a clue. I think I was seeking, how do I fill this loneliness?
Gotcha.
Right? So I think then I thought, I just need somebody to love
Somebody
me
love
more,
me,
right? And it's not that my parents didn't love me, because
Mhm.
that's not true, but it was like all external, where do I get this, right? But I think looking back on it now, it's like, okay, so I'm different. I don't know how I fit in as me,
Mhm.
because I don't know who I
I was gonna say, you don't know
am,
who you are.
because I'm very easily, who do you want me to be? And I
Mhm.
can be that person, and I can be really well liked being that person,
Mhm.
right? So so it was that loneliness, because I
Right.
was completely disconnected
You can
from
be in a room
self.
full of people and still be lonely.
Still be lonely.
Yeah.
To this day, if
Yeah,
I'm not
absolutely.
aware of it, I can be.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So when do you think the spiritual light bulb went on again?
So I was 27, again, making stupid amounts of money, and that's kind of the story in Atlanta. They say it's like the poor millionaire, because everyone makes 6 figures, but nobody has anything to show for it, except for like all of your really nice cars and really nice clothes, you
Okay.
know. And so I remember we were coming up on New Year's, and I was like, I want this year to be different. I don't want it to just be, because all of my identity was wrapped up in, I'm this really good salesperson and I make money, right?
Right.
That was my identity, and I was seeking something else. So I looked for volunteer positions. I saw a volunteer opportunity to do art with children, and it was through a yoga studio.
Mm-hmm.
So I show up to that yoga studio to inquire about it, and on the wall is a sign for Reiki. And it was a Reiki 1 class. And I had no idea what Reiki, but it was like this. And I was just like, that's not there. So I show up to this class. It's a 12-week Reiki 1 class, which is not what you typically find anymore.
Not anymore, no.
Everyone there was already on their spiritual path, except for me. And we had to do things like dig up dirt and put it in a baggie and carry it around with you. And all these people were like, okay, makes sense. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, why?
I do not want to carry a bag of dirt.
Right? And so I did the things, but I didn't have a connection to them at that point, right? Because I wasn't actually spiritually open, but I knew that that was my path. And I showed up every single week.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember him saying, this was life-changing for me. So I'm going to say it to you in case you need to hear this, whoever is watching this. I don't care if you show up late. If you want to show up, just show up. And it was like this just acceptance of like, whatever else else is going on. If you want to be here,
Then be
just
here.
come.
Yeah.
Come as you are, come when you can. Just show up. Just actually show up.
Mm-hmm.
And so show up I did, and put dirt in my pocket I did, and bless your water I did, and go out and commune with the rocks and the tree. And it was just like, I don't know why I'm doing this stuff, but I'm gonna do it.
Right.
And so I say Reiki was my gateway drug into the spiritual world.
Yep.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
it was 6 months after that I found EFT, and I went through.
What's EFT?
Okay, so EFT is emotional freedom technique, and it's basically self-acupuncture. It's tapping on pressure points, and it just doing this, I can feel it. It helps you just move stuff through your body, especially emotions, stuff that's, and I was just like, I should. There was a woman, I call her my angel, her name was Terry Stefferman, and she held the circle, and it was $10 a week, and we tapped for hours, and I was like, I can do $10 a week, and every single week I showed up, and every single week I cried, and every single week I went home a different person, and I kept showing up,
Right.
until she stopped holding the circle. But during that process, she started having us all lead the tapping.
Ooh.
And she was like, you can do this. Yeah, and she said that to every person, but like, she's like, you know exactly. You hear the words, because it's a lot of talking while tapping, like actually acknowledging the emotion instead of what we typically do. And yeah, life-changing.
So we did Reiki, and 6 months later EFT. Then what'd you do after that?
I don't even know. I'm very nomadic in my
Just talk about them as they come up.
yeah, what came after that? I'm gonna miss some, but I was a certification junkie, right? So I was like, well, if I'm gonna do this, then I have to do this. So I'm certified in EFT. I'm certified in matrix re-imprinting, which is kind of like using EFT, but on like visual memories that you have, and like actually like tapping on your holographic younger self kind of thing. Human design is, I did astrology, like your traditional old school astrology, and then later I found human design, which is a whole incredible way of looking at your birth chart. That was the first time I saw something in my birth chart that showed me the line of loneliness, and that I'm actually here, like yes, it's in there, but I'm here to understand it so well that I can speak about it. Right? And so having a human design chart, I don't do it professionally, but anytime somebody's willing, I'm like, let me see your birth chart. Even people who don't believe in it, I've been like, people who are struggling with their kids, which we all do. We all do. I'm like, well, what's their date of birth? And I'll give them like a 10-minute voice memo thing, and they're just like,
what?
Yeah, that's it. Right? So it helped me see my vulnerabilities in a whole new way. So I went and I got certified in that, right? Because again, my identity was in who can I be, right? And so since I was also seeking like, how can I help others? It was like, well, then I need to be certified, right, for that.
It validates everything.
Yeah. I had to go on a 2-year stint where I was like, zero certifications, done.
I'm on the patch.
I took one yoga class, decided I liked yoga, was like, I need to be certified. So I have my yoga teacher training in that too. There are modalities I'm so missing, and I really hold on to and use. Tapping is something, if I'm watching, like I can't really watch the news without getting anxious. Even there was a show called Parenthood. Yep. I love that show. But they'd all be at the table talking over each other, and that's a trigger for me. So I'd sit and I'd tap during it, so that I'm actually kind of doing my work without having to sit and do my work.
Wow. So you have lots of tools in your toolbox.
Yes.
Okay. So what is it you're doing with all those tools now?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you talk about, we went to one of your workshops about sensory deprivation.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
Yes. So,
She comes in with a basket full of blindfolds. I was like, what is happening here? It's going to get funky up in here.
You know, what I love about taking away the sense of sight is we see the world. I see the world through what do you want me to be? And when I put on a blindfold and I go within, that's when I really connect to who I am without that fear of, but what are they thinking? Mm-hmm. So sensory deprivation in its most basic term is just taking away just taking away one or more of your senses in order to heighten other senses. So this is why you have the blind are usually really strong hearing or their sense of smell, right? Because other things are heightened when you take away one of the 5 traditional senses. The way I like to think of it as is we have so many more senses than what we're taught in school, right? We have the sense of knowing, we have the sense of trust, we have all of these senses. And so when you take away one or more of those traditional 5 senses, it allows everything else to heighten. So your awareness, it's like it kind of deprograms, takes away all of the conditioning that we have, and it allows all of that goodness to come out. And
it's not easy. I mean, in today's society, there's so much stimulus coming at you that it's it's hard.
It's our children are anxious because we're anxious, but our children are also anxious because
it's constant.
It's constant. It's constant.
I can't watch some of the I don't even CNN and all those things, but they have the ticker tapes running across all the time. Some of them have them running different ways. I'm like, what is that?
Yeah.
I can't do it.
Yeah.
It's too much.
It's too much. I think that was one of the things when I was in sales. One of the reasons I was really good at it, but I also didn't like it, is because I was tied to my phone and I couldn't put it on silence. Right? So it was ding, 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 ding. And what I noticed is 2 things. One, every time that notification beep went up, I could feel my nervous system go up. I could, because I started at that point, right? So now I'm in my later 20s, and I had Reiki now for a few years. I had EFT, so I was kind of clearing away some of that conditioning that shuts everything off, and I was starting to feel things. I was starting to feel. So
which is uncomfortable.
Feel my response and I could go from 0 to 10, and that was happening all day long. And what happened is I actually, and I'm still working through this, had voicemail aversion. Voicemails because of the type of sales that I did. If somebody was calling to leave me a voicemail, it was not you are amazing.
You are
Thank you for being you. It was like another fire to put out.
Wow.
And so I stopped listening to voicemails on my personal phone. And to this day, I have voicemails on my phone from 2 years ago. And now you can just read them.
Right. That's true. You
and
don't have
I
to listen to them.
Still have a few because I know that in it, right, there's personal growth and work for me to do in that response, and I just so I still do that. So it's taken me a very long time to come to this recognition, right? So then I become a mom, and I'm like, I'm gonna be the best mom, right? Because I'm also the best student. I can get the job, so I'm gonna be the best, right? Even though I have no idea what that means, right?
But you are going to be the best.
But I'm going to give all of me to this, to the point where I had known in my 20s that I went through periods of depression. I actually really knew it because eyesight EFT saved my life from going down like into a path of suicidalness. You know, I think EFT like was such an important life-changing space for me. But what I didn't know was the level of anxiety and depression and how I knew that I'd feel it, but I also knew I could pull myself out of it, right? Okay. So it's just like
cycling through.
Constant. After I had my son, I went through a depression where I was just like, I wanted to leave everything. I wanted to leave my marriage. I wanted to I didn't know if I wanted to take the baby with me. And it's not like I wanted to leave and get divorced. I wanted to get in a car and drive somewhere where nobody could find me.
Ooh.
Right?
Wow.
And it wasn't I don't even think I wanted to start over. I think I just remember that feeling I just need to get away.
Wow.
Right? Which is so funny because sensory deprivation is for me that getting away, but in a safe, normal, healthy way. Right? And so, but I pulled out of that, right? I used all of my tools.
Mm-hmm.
So this week, last year, go ahead.
When you had the depression, did you go seek counsel? Did they try to put you on meds or anything?
I had tried meds twice before in my life,
mm-hmm.
and never more than a month.
Okay.
Because I was just I think one time I was oh, this works, I'm good, I'm good. I've got my tools, I'm good. I'm my own best therapist, I'm okay. I've got all of my tools and they don't notice, right? And at a point, I was doing EFT sessions with people, and I had 2 therapists
mm-hmm.
who were coming to me for EFT, and they were if every therapist used this tool,
mm-hmm.
right? So I was so they don't know. Don't listen to that. That's BS. Everyone should have a therapist, right? And I can do it all for myself. And then the second time I went on the medication, I could just feel it didn't feel right in my body.
Okay.
It wasn't the
mm-hmm.
right one, so I was quickly off of that. We can cycle back to that because I think that was really not a smart, healthy choice.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where 3 months ago I went on a super low dose of a medicine, and it's been game changer.
Okay.
Game
mm-hmm.
changer. But my ego was so big that I wouldn't allow myself, because at that point I started getting into all these holistic modalities,
mm-hmm.
right? And
mm-hmm.
it was they can save my life though, but I've got all of my tools, but I couldn't maintain anything. And I think part of that was my nervous system was always so active. At this point it was hyper aware of
mm-hmm.
everything, which is kind of also what anxiety is.
Yeah. A constant state of fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say you had all your tools, did you seek sessions with other practitioners, or was that you just using?
I did actually. I did a lot of trades.
Okay.
I did trades with people all around the globe.
Right.
Which was really cool because it also gave me access to clients all around the globe. And when you're talking about getting your identity from, right?
World renowned.
I worked with people on 4 different continents, right? In that business. I was
mm-hmm. That's
and
right.
meanwhile, my happiness level was still, mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, you nailed it with the ego was manning your boat there.
Oh yeah, that ego. It's been alive and well for quite some time.
Well,
mm-hmm.
they keep saying you have to make it your ally. I'm still working on that.
Yeah, right? It can serve a good purpose.
It can. It's that balance. It's just, you gotta find that balance.
Mm-hmm.
And because you're always changing and always growing, that balance is always something different.
Mm-hmm.
So, makes things very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you move through, you have your second child.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Do you go through a depression then as well?
I do, but not as significant. Here's what I remember from that depression. It was a loneliness
mm-hmm.
because my husband and I did not have the tools of communication then that we have now.
Okay.
And so I didn't have the ability to express my needs in a way that I could get them met.
Okay.
Meanwhile, because we're both very nomadic, as I'm pregnant with her, I'm you know what? I'm done with Philly. I need a driveway, and so we need to move. And he goes I don't really want to leave the city. And I was yeah, well, they say you shouldn't make major decisions on hormones, but I'm hormonal, and we need a yard and a driveway, and we gotta move.
Okay.
And my husband's also very much okay. And so off we moved. Only 20 minutes from Philly, but it's a whole different state. It's crossing a bridge. I didn't realize the separation that I was causing from that community that I had developed of moms. So here I am having a second baby, just moved to a new place you know, and I did have women who showed up and supported me. I'd been there 5 months, I think, at that point. Like, I had made some connections with some women who are actually still in my life. So I had made some soul connections. Yeah. But I also remember not really knowing who to call. And so what I remember from that point is I had read that women in Israel get sent away with their baby. And I don't even know if this is true, but I had heard, like, they actually, like, have a place that takes care of the mom and teaches the mom how to take care of the baby. And I just remember being like, that's all I want. I just want to get away. But I wanted to get away with my baby.
The baby this time.
And I wanted to be nurtured, and I wanted to be loved, and I wanted that to come from other women, right? Like, I wanted that.
Community.
So I know that my depression was not nearly what it was. But yeah, and again, it was like, but I'm okay. I can do this.
So number 3 comes.
I'm well prepared at this point. Like, everyone knows. I'm like, all right, listen, I get PPD. I'm be prepared, right? This postpartum depression, it's a thing. Depression, it's a thing for me. I have more of it during the pregnancy than afterwards until 9 months. 9 months hit, and it was like I was flat out. I was done. I will say that was the deepest depression I was in, and it was a year ago this week when I made a choice that, like, I've got to make some changes. And I know that because the memory popped up on my phone yesterday. And I was like, it's been a year. It's been a year.
And what changes did you make?
So I was set to, my husband was turning 40, and I made plans for us to go on a retreat together out in Washington State. So my baby's 11 months old. I kind of hold myself to a rule. I don't leave my babies before 12 months, right? I hold myself to very high standards. And then I see other people being able to do it, and I'm like, right, whole nother. So we're going to go he's into the Wim Hof stuff. So it's like cold ice water baths, hiking. It sounds magical, right? Like, let's go away, do ice baths together, and go hiking in the snow and eating organic food, and it's all going to be great. Except I'm so depressed, I can't even talk to my friend without breaking down in tears. Like, I am exhausted. Like, I'm at my lowest point. And so I had a call with my mentor, and she said 2 days before the trip, and she said, do you want to go on this trip? And I said, no, but I'm obligated to. Like, it's his 40th birthday. I've been promising him this. We need it for our marriage. We just had a 3rd baby, and I'm like, you know, totally touched out at this point. She says, but do you want to go on this trip? And I said, no. I said, because if I go on this trip, I'm coming home in even worse shape. And she was like, you have a decision to make. And so, you know, this is where having a yes husband comes in handy. I knew he wasn't going to be mad. I knew he wasn't going to be like, you are my wife and you have to get on that plane. And I sat him down and I said, I don't think I can go on this trip. But we have my parents coming to watch the kids for 4 days. I also can't cancel that. I can't be home and be in charge of the kids with you on this trip.
Right.
I need to go away. And he said, okay. And so I booked a hotel in Bedford. I knew I needed, because I was a nursing mom, I knew I needed to have a distance that I wouldn't come back. And so that at that point where we were living was 4 hours, 3.5, 4 hours. So I went there. I told the hotel what I was doing. They gave me a room, the furthest room in a corner, quietest, like away from everybody. And because I went midweek, it wasn't at capacity, right? I stayed in that room for the first like 24, 36 hours. I just ordered food, and I had brought food and water with me, and I didn't leave that room. The thing that I've learned looking back on it is I don't give myself much unstructured time.
Mm-hmm.
I've always got goals. I've always got things that I'm going after.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't often give myself that luxury of doing whatever I want in the moment.
Just relax.
And so I made a decision while I was there that they had hiking trails. And on those hiking trails were natural springs. And it's some of the purest water that they have. And that water used to be used medicinally. And this is Bedford Springs, if you want to go and check it out. And that called to my spirit. And so I had made a promise to myself, I can't go to Washington to do these ice baths, but that was the first time I was going to get in fresh, cold, freezing cold water. So I'm going to do this for myself. But what that meant is that I had to hike the 6 miles in the woods by myself.
Wow.
And that is my no, we don't go there. That's not safe.
Wow.
Right? And so for that whole first mile, I just kept repeating to myself, if I'm going to die today, then I'm going to die today. But I'm still going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't see another soul for 6 miles. And I hiked, and I was in a tank top at points in the cold weather, getting that experience that I had thought I needed to go to Washington for.
Right.
I got totally butt naked in the woods, set up my phone so that I had video of it for myself to prove to myself that I did this, and took video of it, and I did it. And the whole time I was like, there is this part of me that doesn't want to feel safe, but there's this voice in me that knows I'm safe. And so I did it, and that experience was life-changing. I came back from that, and I said to my husband, we really need to talk about my mental health. This restored me. I had quiet for 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
I need more of that. I'm such a sensitive person.
Mm-hmm.
I need more of that. So we made a plan, which we didn't quite follow through on, but I said, I think for the next 6 months, once a month it's a need to go away and to see if that helps my mental health.
Okay.
And he's a yes husband, and he said yes.
Mm-hmm.
In January I went away, and that's when I downloaded the sensory deprivation meditation.
Nice.
Yeah. So that happened on a weekend where I had unstructured free time. And that time I just went to a hotel. I price lines. You can price line a hotel for $60. It's still not, that is not an expense that's accessible to every woman. And
Right.
I don't want to pretend in any way that is.
Right.
But what's really nice is most hotels these days, if you show up at 10 a.m. and they have a room, I'm smart, right? I work the system. I check the night before. Are there still rooms available? Okay, I know I can show up at 10 a.m. because they have rooms available.
Right.
And get a room. And I can really maximize this whole trip. And so that fulfilled me. And so I downloaded this whole thing because I knew that wasn't accessible long term.
Mm-hmm.
I can't just keep being like, can I go spend money to go to a hotel and leave you in charge of the kids?
Right. I'm out.
Yeah. And I also knew it wasn't accessible to everybody.
Right.
And so it was kind of one of those moments, hands up to the sky, what's next? And
that's
whole
what they
thing
run.
came through.
Okay. So talk to us about the Dodd protocol for happier living.
Yeah. So that is exactly what I'm talking about. That was downloaded in that weekend. And so what it is, it's a combination of sensory deprivation. We had already tried sensory deprivation tanks, which if you don't know what that is, it's getting into a dark tank, 8 feet by this much water, salt water, so that you float. And what happens is, because so much of our body is working to keep us upright, you can actually relax into a state that it heals your body physically, but also mentally lets you let go. Yeah. So I already had that experience, but again, not accessible to everybody. And to do that is 4 hours out of my day to drive there to go do that. So this process, blindfold on, you take away your sense of sight. You're automatically going to heighten everything. Even if you close your eyes, it's so much easier to cheat, and we all like to cheat ourselves, right? That ego is big.
Absolutely.
So when you put on a blindfold, it just takes away that ease of cheating.
Mm-hmm.
Earplugs in, because when you put earplugs in, one, I think I did it because the baby was still waking up some nights and I was like, I need to sleep. And so Patrick for Christmas got me earplugs and I was like, right, total judgment thing. No good mom would ever put earplugs. Like, why didn't I listen to those moms 8 years ago? Who were like, just put in earplugs.
Put in earplugs.
Right? But I hold myself to the highest standard.
Mm-hmm.
So earplugs, I realized you actually hear your breath in a whole different way when you've got that in.
Mm-hmm.
And then energy medicine, Donna Eden energy medicine is just something, again, another technique I use. I saw practitioners for, like, that was a healing modality that had really called to me.
Mm-hmm.
So doing this movement deactivates your nervous system. So it's called the triple warmer smoothie in her terms, and it genuinely turns off your nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it takes down your fight or flight is what it does.
Mm-hmm.
And because so many of us do live in either fight or flight, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
that's like anxiety or depression. Which one are you picking?
Yep.
We're not here. And this, I mean, I could just sit here and do this the whole time. Just takes that away so that we're actually here.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do, the sense of smell can speak to that part in your brain, your limbic system that holds and stores memories, right? And so I've done all of this emotional work and this work on memories, but sometimes you just want somebody to do it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what the essential oil is to me. So drop some oil in, rub it on your hands, put on your blindfolds, put on your earplugs, and every time I'd start, I'd smell, and then I do this 3 times on each side, and then I'd go into my meditation. But the thing about meditating, even as an experienced meditator, is I would say it takes me 19 minutes out of 20 to get to that state of total bliss where your mind just shuts off. And so if it was taking me that long to get into a meditative state, I wanted like 60 minutes. And I also wanted to journal, and I also wanted to tap, and I also wanted to run. And as a mom of 3 kids, don't have, right? I was like, I gotta wake up at 3 a.m. to get everything done. So what I found is doing this, every time my mind had a thought, every time my mind started to wander, or every time my body started to have a response, I would just shut it down by doing this. So I've got my senses, I've got my physical senses turned off so that my internal senses are turned on, and then I'm just telling my nervous system, like, you are not in charge today. And then what I found is it would take me about 12 minutes of that to be equivalent to 60 minutes of sitting in meditation. And I can do 12 minutes, right? I could do 12 minutes of that. And then also, like Pavlov's dog, where you give the training and you have to create the response, I could then go throughout my day just sniffing the oil, right? Or just doing this, and it would take me right back into that state.
Nice. Yeah. And it works.
Yeah.
Like I said, we did the workshop with Steph, and when I laughed, because even at the workshop I said, when I sit to meditate, it's amazing how much I beat myself up for not being able to silence my brain.
Yeah, we shame ourselves.
Yeah, we really do. And just that simple, the smell, and it really does work.
I have
really works.
not had a person tell me that it doesn't.
You're full of shit, right?
No, I've had one person who was like, I didn't feel like I was meditating, but I felt really good afterwards, because she's a really experienced meditator. She was like, it kind of took me out of my meditation. She's like, but I felt really good afterwards, and I was like, it worked. What are you supposed to do? And I think it's great, because anyone who doesn't meditate or who meditates, I've got both ends of the spectrum being like, that worked. It got me to that place very quickly. And when I teach a workshop, we normally only go for 5 minutes. And people in the workshops, I've had workshops of 35 people, and everyone was like,
wow. Okay, so you sparked a bunch of interest. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can find me at Stephanie Dodd, and I have a link where if you click on it, it's like, give me your email, I'll give you something. You know the game by now.
That's how it works.
The truth is, I don't email out very much right now. But there's a 10-minute video. I like to keep it short, succinct, and it basically walks you through everything that I just told you and goes in just a little bit deeper. So I would say if you don't want to trade your email, just watch this again and do it. Like, your body knows exactly what it needs, and if you do it and if you listen to that voice that pops up when you're in that state, you'll have all the answers. But if you want a good 10-minute video where I will self-critique myself here because I start on and I go, hi!
But you're excited.
But when you get past the first 15 seconds, it's really good. And so that's on there. The other thing that I'm doing now is, that's a process that I use to get myself into a good creative state. And I think that we're all creatives, and I know so many of us want to be doing more with that. And so I really think I'm going to start taking that work and helping creatives tap into their like creative power, specifically through writing. Writing has always been transformational for me, and so I'm doing a lot of writing so that my story, these stories that we don't, like, you interview people because you want to know their story, right? We all want to know each other's stories. And I had a friend whose mom was passing away with dementia, and she said, my biggest regret is I can't ask my mom what she felt like when she was my age. And that stuck with me to a point where I was like, I want my kids to understand, right? My son has lived in Philly, New Jersey, Doylestown, and Hershey, right? I want him to understand why. Not just like, oh, my parents up and moved.
They like to move a lot.
Right? I want him to understand the identity changes that were happening and the growth that happened in all of those places. And even my daughter, she just started kindergarten, and we just took her out of her school and put her in a new school. And like, I want her to have that story of what was going on now. Not when she asks me when she's 20 and I'm in my 60s.
And you're
right?
trying to remember.
Because you don't remember everything, or you remember the big stuff, but I want her to have an understanding of like what was going on in our lives, right? And I think so many of us want to be writers because we think it's going to fill that ego need. We think it's going to give us that identity piece. I think when you take all of that away, we really just want people to know our story. Yeah. And so my goal for 2020 is to start a publishing company, I guess, and I help women write their stories. If you want to take that and sell that to an agent and whatever, have at it. That's not the type of publishing I want to do.
Right.
I'm writing my stories for my kids. I know other people will enjoy reading it.
Wow.
But my purpose, like, I know within me, right, I can ask for a job and I can get it. I know within me I've got some big goals for my own stories and publishing that I can get to, but I also think I need to start with what the truth is. And the truth is, I'm writing right now for my kids.
I love that.
And so when you start writing, though, memories come up. And if you don't have the tools to process those memories, right, that's why you stop. This is
because
too
you
much.
don't want to feel it. Yeah.
I don't want to feel it.
I don't want to feel that
I'm
again.
not going there. I am done. This is too hard. I don't have enough time.
Yeah.
That's
always the easy out.
What we'll say, right? So when you use this process to get really clear, I can do that process along with breath work, and I can be told exactly what I'm supposed to write about. So combining that and breath work, which we haven't even talked about, something else I got certified.
Of course you are.
Can be really powerful to help us do our own processing, so we do get to that place where we're okay feeling and we're okay listening.
Yeah.
But we're also, right, that's when the generational shifts and everything, right? Like all any parent wants for their kid is for them to be happy, right? You ask any parent what, right? Well, when you have that understanding of who you are because you know where you came from, then you don't have to be nomadic to find your identity.
Right. Well, your kids are blessed with two very aware and conscious parents. So instead of that I'm different, I need to be that chameleon. It's you're different and it needs to be embraced and nurtured.
And as a couple, we're still, you know, he and I as a couple are still, it's interesting, we talked about like how I'm different and the loneliness. Like as a couple, we can still be that in the sea of like everybody. But we can do it with awareness and understanding.
Absolutely.
And,
it's from a different space.
Yeah.
And you know, that sharing your story, sharing your truth is human connection. And that's what society has lost.
And that's how we find ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
So real simple, but my sister was over last night and I sent my son up who's 8 to take a shower and she was like, he showers by himself. And I was like, yeah, it's really odd. One day I was out to lunch with a friend a year and a half ago and her son, who's like 5 months younger than Brandon, was getting showers by himself. And I was like, I didn't even know that was possible. But that, with 3 little kids at home, would be
that's brilliant.
All right, I mean, I can teach him how to shower, right? So it's like we hear other people's stories and
like,
we get the things that resonate with us.
Absolutely.
I could have also been like, good on him. Like, no, I love my time getting him through the shower, right? Like, it could have not resonated.
Absolutely.
But you don't know until you hear other people's stories. And then you take, like, that. Even if you're so shut off that you're not feeling, there is a spark that you will feel. And when you follow that spark, right? That was me walking into the yoga studio to volunteer and seeing that Reiki sign and being like,
exactly. Yep. You just had to follow it all up and down the East Coast, that's all. That's all right.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have any workshops coming up that you'd like to share?
I do. I have one. It is a meditation workshop. So we're going to be doing the sensory deprivation meditation, and I'm going to throw in breath work because those two things combined are just like
work together. Where
I am at. And so I think it's a free event. It is at Reiki by Ricky in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It is on January 9th. I'm going to say it's 7 p.m., but I'm not positive on that. I think it is. Check her website. Register, show up, do whatever. If you want any type of transformation, if there's any part of like this story that resonated with you, just get your booty there if you can. And we're gonna breathe and be and meditate for an hour, but no shaming, no shit shaming yourself in this meditation.
No.
That I call it the itty bitty shitty committee that pops up. Like we just shut it down. Like that's what you're supposed to shut down.
Not today, honey.
Not today. Instead of shutting down the feelings, we shut that down.
Exactly. Yeah. That's awesome. Stephanie doesn't know this yet, but we're gonna talk to her and see if maybe she wants to book some dates at Journeys.
Yeah.
And get you there. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Awesome. I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in. Like
outstanding.
Yeah.
Okay, so we always ask our guests. We were actually talking before we started the show about the energy recently has been even more intense than it has been. Do you have any pearls of wisdom for our viewers that are struggling?
I do. So this is just what immediately came to me. The energy, yes, has been super intense. And so we saw our daughter go through some things in schooling, which I know really triggered me because I know that they talk to my 5-year-old self. She's 5. At 5, you're still figuring out. I say you're still figuring out who you are in the world. Of course
you're just beginning
to. But so vulnerable, and she was able to express some feelings of feeling out of control and unsafe.
Wow.
And first of all, like, my goodness, that she could express that.
Yes.
And so, like a slingshot, this is how I make my major decisions, right? I've been observing this before she even communicated it since day one. So this is how I slingshot back, and when I get that inkling to go, it's like, go. Okay. So here's the pearl of wisdom. On that go, on this decision, I knew if I made too many pit stops, if I let too many opinions, if I asked for too much advice from other people, it was going to cloud my judgment.
Okay.
Pulling her out of school and changing schools is like, what are we doing? This is like, we're in a community, and I'm taking her out of that community, of that school, right? All kids in Hershey go to one school. You don't have 7 or 8 different elementary schools. You have
One school.
right? So I could have let all of these what ifs come
Right.
into play. But I knew what that slingshot was.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a ball of trust. And it may have nothing to do with the school. It may have everything to do with the school. It doesn't matter. What matters is between her and I was very clear
Mm-hmm.
on what had to happen. Right?
Mhm.
And it didn't have anything to do with anybody else other than I knew my truth. Because I knew when I got quiet,
Mm-hmm.
when I sat in meditation, and in fact I did a fast as well,
Mm-hmm.
so that I was clear.
Mm-hmm. That you were doing what was best for your daughter.
And because again, right, like master manipulator, I could know who to go to for advice that would tell me that I'm
What
doing
you
the
wanted
right
to
thing.
hear. Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I could go to people who might tell me, right?
Right.
And so I had to just
Let it be.
head down, make decision, trust decision, do decision. Let people know along the way,
Mm-hmm.
but don't ask them for advice.
Right.
Because when you know, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem when we let other people influence us, that's when we start to doubt. And when we start to doubt, we start to spiral. And when we start to spiral, we get into overwhelm. And when we're overwhelmed, the anxiety builds. And when the anxiety gets to be too much, that's when you land in depression and digging yourself out of that. It sucks. Been there many times.
Mm-hmm.
So slingshot, trust, whoosh, if you know, you know.
Right. So was this decision just yours, or you and Patrick?
He's a yes man.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say.
No. This decision, we have come to a place of, we have worked very hard to come to a place of being able to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
He also knows and trusts,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
That
You're on.
that when I'm on and I'm clear,
It is.
he can trust that.
Mhm.
Now, because he was traveling, I'm the one that did the school tour and was like, I'm in love. It's just a fit for our family and the
Mhm.
way that we parent, right? Because remember, we're also like, we're like the spot outside of all the
You're
spots,
aware.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a really great fit for
Excellent.
us.
Good.
I did, of course, not sign any papers or make any decision until he was home and
Right.
could go on a tour.
Mm-hmm.
But I also knew what his response was going to be. And he came home and he was like, I love it. It's good.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much.
You're so
This has been
welcome.
great.
Thank you.
Um,
I
next
I don't know if anyone made it to the end.
it's been a while. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute.
Next week we have Emily Katzman,
Yes.
and she is the owner of Upgrade Your Life Health Coaching. So that'll be a fun one as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Don't forget you're awesome.